Hello, my name is Eric with AtlasIED, and I'm just putting together a quick video to answer a customer question regarding the room combiner function within BlueBridge. This isn't going to go tremendously in depth, but I don't think that this requires an in-depth video because it's a pretty simple answer. What we have in this case is a 3-room banquet hall that has the ability to combine rooms 1 and 2, rooms 2 and 3, or rooms 1, 2, and 3 together. Kind of in this little layout that I downloaded from the internet of a banquet hall somewhere in Colorado, or at least named after Colorado. So what I've done here is created just 3 inputs and 3 outputs on this BlueBridge. I've left out any superfluous or uninvolved processing that you usually would do in a real system. This is just for demonstration purposes. I kept it simple. And also, one liberty I've taken here is I've created 3 sine wave generators which are going to simulate our input. So you can just kind of ignore those. They're just a source of audio for us to use. In here I've installed a room combiner. This is the room combiner module that would just be brought over from the left side menu here. So we just drag that over and drop it in place and wire it in. In order to set this up for the rooms I have, I've highlighted it, and on the right hand side here I'm choosing the number of groups I'm using, and that's the number of possible combinations of rooms. In this case we have 3 different groupings of rooms because what we have is the ability to group rooms 1 and 2 together. We have the ability to group 1, 2, and 3 together, and we have the ability to group rooms 2 and 3 together. Now there may be some scenarios where the rooms are not contiguous, they're not together in a row, they may be a different shape of ballroom where you might combine rooms 1 and 3 but not 2. That's not part of this demonstration, but of course that would just mean that you would create an additional grouping when you're selecting from the drop-down menu. You'd choose as many as there are iterations of realistic room combinations you might use. And there may be an instance where you could add on here the ability to combine them in a way that they wouldn't typically be combined, but then that runs into how much cognitive load you really want to put on the user of the system to figure out, looking through all their options. You want to make it as easy as possible, of course, for the end user. So we've limited ourselves to 3, even though mathematically maybe there are more than 3 possibilities. Realistically, there are 3 plus the 3 separate rooms. Now, to answer the question of how you implement that, what I've got in this case is a BlueBridge Touch 7, which is just our 7-inch LCD touchscreen. You can utilize any of our control schemes for this. So you can use a wall controller that has physical buttons like our BBWP S4, or you can utilize iPad application, Android application, Mac or PC input. Really, it's not important how you control it. This is just for the Touch 7, since that's one of the ways that's available that many people choose. On this one, I've already added in here our ability to turn on and off the source audio. Again, this is strictly for the purpose of demonstration and not really part of a system that you would actually use. Here's the part you actually would use. So first I'll open up our output and I'll give us some meters that are labeled. So I'm just highlighting these guys and I'm going to drag and drop them onto that screen, and I'll just put them up here. We can do some cosmetic work to these to make everything look pretty and match the aesthetic of the building. I'm not going to do that cosmetic work for this demonstration. It's just not really necessary for the purpose of showing how to use it. The next thing I'm going to do is on this room combiner, I'll open it up and I'll take our output volume controls and I'll just highlight those and I'll drop them in place here and resize them so that they at least line up with our meters. So let's go ahead and line those guys up. And now these are in place, so we can just leave this stuff as it is for now. The last thing I'm going to do is take our room grouping buttons, and I'm highlighting these guys here, and I'm just going to drag them up and place them in here. And right now they just say disabled because they're not enabled. One way to take care of the labeling is I could copy these labels and bring them up there and drop them in place, and then I can create a name for each of these. So for example, this might be our Colorado 1 plus 2. And then our next one could be all combine. And then the last one could be Colorado 2 plus 3. And of course those names are just simply because that's the name that's chosen on this particular floor plan that I downloaded from the internet. So we can name them like that. An alternate way of naming things is you can take this button itself and you can change the name that's on the button. So we could call this, for example, Colorado 1+2. And then we can resize that button and make that a little bit larger. And I like to do that typically. I just think it looks a little bit better to use the button itself as opposed to having a separate label, but you pick what makes the most sense in the room that you're using or in the system that you're using. And we'll just resize this. And I'll take this last one here and I'll go ahead and rename it. Now that those exist, I'll go ahead and get rid of this, and just for the sake of making things easier for our end user, I'm also going to bring over an image. I'll just bring this image over and I'll choose the floor plan. Again, this is just something I downloaded from the internet. And chances are if you were doing this in a real facility, you would probably have your creative services department or whoever does artwork for you make a stylized and specific layout plan that is very easily identifiable for the end user. Instead of where I've done here, where I just downloaded a floor plan, as I said, from the internet. So now that we have these in place, I also am going to make sure that this output selection gain link is enabled, and we'll go ahead and just see where you can see this says control link. Linking the controls for this, and you'll see how that's important in a moment. So now that I've got this set up, I've set up the room combinations that I want this to work in, and you can see that under group 1, 2, and 3, I've got the room combinations we're going to work with. There also, of course, is all 3 rooms independent of each other, but that would simply exist by not pressing any of the buttons. That's the default state. So I'll click on Load Design to Devices. And I've already published this to the system once, so that's why it's not having me load it to the device. I could load it to the device, it would just take a bit longer. And now that we're in live mode, what I can do here is I'll change the size of this a little bit so you can see the screen well, what's happening. This touch panel interface right here is representative of what the end user would actually see on their screen. And if I enable an input source, for example on room 1, you can see that now we would have audio routed to room number 1 and volume control is independent to that same room number 1. If I choose Colorado 1 and 2, this combination of the first 2 rooms here, you can see that that audio is now distributed to both rooms 1 and 2, and if I give an input to room 2 and not to room 1, you can see that it still is going across to both of those rooms. It's combining both inputs to both rooms. Another thing that's happening is that it's linking both the volume controls. So you can see when I turn the volume down, they both track each other. And you can see that that takes place in both the screen as well as on the DSP. It happens live. They will track each other, and as long as they're combined. Now if I choose, for example, all combine, I will have to unselect the one that is previously selected there. So it's not like a radio button where it automatically trips to the following one. You have to select or deselect as needed. And the reason that that's the case is maybe not so much when you have 3 rooms like this, but if you had 4 rooms, you might have an instance where you have rooms 1 and 2 combined and rooms 3 and 4 combined. And you'd want to be able to select both of those combinations independent of each other. So that's why it doesn't deselect options. It only selects, and then you have to manually deselect the ones you're not going to be using. But you can see right now with all combined, all of the volume controls are all moving in unison. And it doesn't matter which of the inputs are active, which room active or has an input going into it. It's going to go to all 3 of the rooms because all 3 inputs go to all 3 destinations. And lastly, of course, if I choose rooms 2 and 3, that again becomes rooms 2 and 3 become linked, and room 1, which is not part of that group, is fully independent and gets supplied with audio from itself and itself alone. So. That's really all there is to the room combining module. There is, of course, the ability to select background music in here as well. So if you want to select which background music is playing in those rooms, you can place the drop-down menu on your touch screen for background music channels, and you can have that independent per room. I don't think that's quite what was being asked about, but that's pretty similar and intuitive to this as well. When you combine them, the background music combines as well, and they all, will track each other when you choose this control link. Change the selection in one room, and if the rooms are linked, it'll change in the other rooms that subsequently follow it. So I hope that's answered the question that I was asked, and I hope this is helpful to anybody else who watches it. Again, this is Eric with AtlasIED. Hope you learned something.